Welcome to How to Date Better, where hopefully I'll give you some more info on how to date better. So, from my perspective, dating is a reflection of this human relationships, of the romantic capacity, and from the work that I've done. I'm Kirby, for anyone who doesn't know. Joy's out for a while, should be back in February. In my belief, dating and the drive that we have for romantic connection is 100% related to what we call the attachment system inside the human brain. And the attachment system is something that forms in our initial 18 months of our life, and that's kind of what this is all about. And dating, so that means dating is a reflection and usually kind of an acting out of things that happen in the first 18 months of our life. So for those of you that are new, I don't come at this from I don't know how to describe it, but it's not a feely kind of thing. I'm very much on the science side. It's like, what's the physiology going on? What's happening inside our brain? What traumas are there? Because it turns out that all this is being driven by trauma. And when I say trauma, I mean something very specific. It's a specific type of neurological event, which I can get into if we're interested. But one of the things that comes up a lot is vulnerability. So that's the topic for today. So for the new people, I guess we got two. I'll try to do this very quickly. I believe what's in what we call the two-mind model, what I call the two-mind model or two-mind method. And that's recognizing that a human has two fundamental personalities inside. And we can think of it as the conscious and the subconscious, or the adult and the child, or thinking fast and thinking slow, emotional brain, feeling brain. Many different teachers have had different names for this divergence. But the key thing to understand, is that they function differently. They have different motives, they have different memory systems, they have different cognitive capacities, they have different emotional capacities, and trying to take a human being and merge these two things into a single entity will cause all sorts of drama and confusion. And I believe this is the biggest fallacy we make when interacting with another human being, is trying to think of them as one thing, or one person, or one personality. They are not. I've got tons of evidence to support this. Quick overview. Conscious brain is over here. This is where I live. When you think I did that whole concept of I is over here. Language lives over here. This side doesn't have language. Deductive reasoning. A plus B equals C, or the glass fell down and it broke. It's because of the cat, right? That's deduction. That's here. This has to do with predictive modeling. I can take information I know about a system and create a virtual model of it in my head and tinker with that model and project what the outcome is going to be. That's over here. And this is actually the outer layer of the brain, has all these specialized neurons that are really good at this. This is actually the thing that makes us different than other creatures. Inhibition. There's a portion of the brain up here, prefrontal cortex, that has the ability to slow down that child animalistic reactive part, the part that's freaking out and bringing up all this emotional reactivity. There's a little section up here that says, shh, be quiet for a second, slow down. However, that consumes a lot of energy, way more energy than other cognitive abilities, because it's like in a car, one foot's on the gas over here being like, react with all these emotions, and this part's being like, no, on the brake, no, don't go anywhere. So it's not stop moving the car, it's not stop accelerating, it's like you're accelerating at 100%, but I'm also putting the brakes on at 100%. So that is consuming a tremendous caloric load inside the brain to activate inhibitive functions. So, and then what we have, something called the narrative memory system. Narrative memory system is the part of a brain that says, I woke up at 6, I went to the gym, and then I went to Starbucks, in that order, right? A, B, C. That's the narrative memory system. We are not born with a narrative memory system. The narrative memory system is something that's assembled over 18 to 24 months. It's built. The reason why most people don't have memories, or this contributes to the reason why we don't have memories that go back before 3, is because that memory system didn't even exist yet. There are certain cases where it can form earlier, but for most of us, that memory system didn't exist. Over here, on the emotional side, or I think of this as like, this is my little 5-year-old at a command center, and he's got all these buttons and levers here, and this is like all my emotions and hormonal releases. So he's got a button here that says like anger, and the little dial here that says, oh, this is desire, or craving, or disgust, right? He's got all these command buttons, but he's behind the curtain, like Wizard of Oz style. I can't see him. I live over here. And I can't see the inner child. I can't see him at the command center. But all I get, the way he communicates with me, is he pushes a button from the emotion. And the emotion like flies over the curtain and it lands into my conscious mind, and I'm like, anger, with all the physiological reactions. And I gotta be like, oh, my inner child is feeling anger right now. I have the ability to use my cognitive capacity over here to inquire why. Think of emotions as messengers. It is a messaging system that allows this portion of the mind to communicate with this portion of the mind. Because he doesn't have language. All he has is emotions and imagery. Dreams are over here. Procedural memory system. The procedural memory system is how we do it. The whole package. Procedural is the thing that like someone throws a ball at me and I can reach up my hand and catch it. I don't think about it. I just reach up and catch it. But that also means someone is standing in front of me and their eye starts twitching in anger and my body knows what to do. Right? So if someone throws me the ball, I know what to do. If someone's standing there with their eye twitching and they're showing nonverbal signs of anger, my body knows what to do. I don't think about it. It's not a cognitive process. This guy over here says, I got this one, pushes the hijack button, and makes all the muscles, hormones, and autonomic responses fire automatically. That's what being triggered is. It's an activation of a traumatic memory that's stored in the procedural memory system. In what I believe anyway. Okay, next up, I'm trying to be as quickly as possible. This is based on the work of a guy by the name of Daniel Brown. He's the star witness that they call when basically large numbers of children are being chronically abused. He worked out this model that I call the 5 pillars of attachment. The premise here is that every human child comes out of the womb with a fundamental instinctive craving to be wanted, chosen, and prioritized. Because every child that came out of the womb not wanting this probably died on the plains of the Serengeti. Right? This is an evolutionary response. We're social primates that if we are alone, they say a lone primate is a dead primate. If that baby did not have a fundamental craving for connection and wanting to be needed and desired and just wandered off by itself, he was probably eaten by a leopard. So that adaptation or evolutionary strain basically gets trimmed, and we are what's left. We are the humans that want to be wanted, chosen, and prioritized. How do we get the feeling of wanted, chosen, and prioritized? Especially in that first 18 months, is it's these 5 experiences. Felt safety, feeling safe, not knowing you're safe. Attunement, which is some entity outside myself wants to know who I am, what my inner world is. That's attunement. If I attune to someone else, I go looking for them. If I'm being attuned to, they are looking into me. We frequently around here, it's called feeling seen and heard. That's attunement. Support when dysregulated. My inner child, hit the hijack button. My nervous system is going wild. Emotions are flowing out of me. I'm basically out of control. And that's scary. If this entity outside myself can be present with me and create a sense of safety so that I can go through that process, that is being support while I am being dysregulated. And a child wants to feel that. If you support me when I'm dysregulated, that means you probably want me around. You're probably, because it's a lot of work. You're choosing me. You're choosing to go all through this work with me while I'm basically out of control. We feel that. Express the light. It's one thing to say, hey, Sally, I love you. It's a different thing to go up on top of the rooftops and shout it to the whole village. I'm elated this child exists. And the children know the difference. Last one, support for autonomy. The story for that one is basically the baby's in my lap, and he's just like, I want to get down, I want to explore. And you're like, okay. And so he gets down, and he starts wandering away. Something happens, he trips, he falls, he hits his knee, and he's just like, stimulus goes in the nervous system. He's like, crisis. What do? I look back at my supportive figure, which we call the primary attachment figure. Are you still there? Yes, I'm still here. No blame, no shame. I will be a stable base as you explore the world and figure out your place in it. You will always be able to come back here. That's support for autonomy. When a person gets adequate amount of these 5 experiences, they create a healthy attachment system. Healthy attachment system is like a superpower. Boundaries emanate from these people naturally. They don't really think about relating. They just do it automatically and easily. It's like what we call a secure attachment, stable individual, that kind of stuff. If we do not get one of these, any of them, we don't get enough as our system needs. Think of it like a hunger, like I'm hungry for rice or I'm hungry for pasta. And I didn't get enough of it when I'm 18 months old. I'm going to keep being hungry for rice the rest of my life. I'm going to keep being hungry for attunement. I'm going to keep being hungry for safety. That hunger will stay inside me forever. And it will quietly, subtly, sometimes not so subtly, drive my entire decision matrix related to human emotion, or human relating, which turns out to be almost everything we do. So a failure, a lack of attunement in our childhood, I didn't feel seen and heard, that will translate 30 years later, 20 years later, 15 years later, into this fundamental, irrational craving to, I want to feel seen and heard. I don't feel seen and heard. I want a partner that's going to come up and he's just going to see into me and he's going to look into me and he's going to understand who I am. That person is saying is, I have a craving for attunement because I didn't get enough of it. And so once we understand how this works, we can begin to see that in the context of a romantic relationship, there's these things happening. There's these dynamics happening, and they're happening for everybody. And they're happening in reliable ways. And so if I'm sitting here with a partner across from me and she's dysregulating because some aspect, some trauma memory just got activated, I'm like, oh, I need to support her. How do I support her? Well, I do the other 4. I create a sense of felt safety. Well, that's hard. How do you make someone feel safe? Well, turns out that's not easy. Okay, we'll come back to that one. Attunement. What's happening inside you right now? Like, I'm here for you. I am interested in what, I can see that you're triggered. I can see that you're activated. I am interested in understanding this because you matter to me. My partner now feels wanted and chosen. I can say, you're doing a great job. I know you're fighting something very difficult right now. This is a huge deal for you. and I'm so impressed in the way you're handling it. And she's going to be like, woo! And then autonomy is like, hey, do you need anything right now? I'm here for you if you need me, but if you want to be alone, or you want to go for a walk, or whatever, I will fully support that. I will be here when you come back. You do these 3 things, guess what? They start feeling safe. Now we've got all 4 covered. And the person is now, hey, I feel supported when I'm dysregulated. And then in that moment, if we do it in adequate measure, this trauma memory that's trapped inside them loosens up a little bit. The emotional charge that's bundled up into that memory, some of it is released, and that trigger will decrease. Being in relationship is like this dance of this is for an insecure person, mind you, like for a person who's fully secure, I would say different things, but for an insecure person, being in a relationship, which most of us are insecure, we did not get enough of this. Being in a relationship is like this dance of holding space for each other. I'm going to do this stuff for me within my capacity so that your traumas can unlock a little bit. And then you're going to do the same for me so that my traumas can unlock a little bit. And then we're going to bounce off of each other. As long as we understand this is going on. Because what usually happens is you trigger me, my traumas activate, I lash out, which triggers your traumas, and now you lash out, and it comes back and forth. What I call trauma ping pong. It's just tick, 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 right? And just goes back and forth. I'm trying to create a situation where other things happen. Okay, so what does all this have to do with vulnerability? Anybody want to guess? Tell me what you know. Somebody raise your hand. Tell me what you know about vulnerability. What does it mean to be vulnerable? Any guesses? Yeah?
It's revealing parts of you that others don't see, so they can actually give you the things you need.
That's a good answer. Yeah. Yes.
Especially the parts that I'm not proud of.
Yes. Exactly. You guys are already on it. Yeah. So, vulnerability in my model is this idea that, just like you said, I'm going to look inward to try to get in touch with what's real and alive in me right now, not yesterday, but right now. And then I'm going to figure out a way to take that information and share it with an outside person. That should be scary. I'm getting ahead of myself. Why is it important? It's important. It's important because if I'm talking with Krish, this Krish, not that one. If I'm talking with Krish and I'm like, and he can see, he can detect with all the subconscious detection systems, which are vast. They say this is like 2 or 3 million bits of data per second, and that's like 2,000. The degree of information processing between the two sides is astronomically different. So this is the side that's picking up on all the nonverbals, the body language, how much sweat is on the brow, like the toe that's turning, how much, the wind blowing through the hair, whatever, right? All this stuff that's happening is being captured, or at least not captured, it's being sensed, right?
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
Because for me, it's also a lot of interoception.
Yeah.
So also all of the stuff which is happening, like literally what my digestive system is doing, how all of the emotions, like what am I wearing, where am I, what is the culture, like all of these
Right.
And then someone asks me like, how are you? I'm like, well, which dimension do you want to hear?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. A lot of data.
There's a lot of data.
Right. So if a person is able to capture all this stuff, this is why, by the way, this is why humans are the best lie detector ever created in the history of the universe, because they capture all this data that's being broadcast by a person. So we're in this discussion, and Krish, his detection system can see that I'm afraid. He can see that I'm uncomfortable. He can see that in my sharing of this information about myself, it's not easy for me. How special do you feel? I just made myself vulnerable, and I faced my fear in order to share this with you. And you can see it. And that's why it feels so good. So there's a big difference, huge difference, between I'm going to share with you vulnerably and I'm going to tell you a story about shit that happened in my life. It's a huge difference.
Also, what I just found revealing is that I go looking for this quality in others because it makes me feel good.
Yeah,
But from my perspective, it feels scary as fuck.
right.
So like it's not like the others go like, oh I love you, and I'm going, oh my god, I'm dying. So but it's very different feel.
Yes,
So
Yes.
and then to offer this is like so different.
right. Which is why that's the stimulus for this, me picking this as a topic, because last week, I mean, I do not believe in shame, so I do not shame or blame anybody. But last week I invited people to enter into an exercise where they dug deep and shared something uncomfortable with the person across from them. And one of the feedbacks I got from a few people is it's like I'm sitting there and I'm in the conversation, but it's like they're spinning in this storytelling mode. And they're just telling me the things that happened. They're telling me how bad it was, how nasty that other person was, whatever. But it's like, this is a friend of mine who's pretty in tune with this stuff, and she was just like, but I'm like, where's your emotion? Like, what are you feeling in this moment as you share this story? And that was completely opaque. And so we talked about it a little bit, and then realized that it's like, if we are in a situation where vulnerability is appropriate, or vulnerability has been invited, and I tell you a story about some shitty thing that happened in my life, I'm actually now using you. I'm not sharing with you anymore. I'm using you. And that's why it feels so nasty. So to have someone be vulnerable with me, I feel special, I feel chosen, I feel prioritized, I feel all the good stuff that brings people closer together. But if that person is dumping a story on me and there's no emotional vulnerability in their telling of that story, they're just repeating this thing, my ex is a narcissist, and he did this thing, and blah, 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 whatever. Like, and they vomit out this story, then I'm like, oh, we're in a one-sided dynamic here. They're just sitting here to use me as a venting board. Well, guess what? Now it starts getting really uncomfortable. Because over here, this is based on the work of Jim Hopper, who he does brain analysis stuff on women that have just, he does brain imaging and stuff on women that have just experienced sexual assault, like serious stuff. And then he uses that information to teach law enforcement officers how to talk to someone that just went through a traumatic experience. So this guy knows what he's talking about. And one of the things he says is that there's 3 common traits, things. There's 3 things that happen in a traumatic moment. The first one is, I'm unsafe. This situation I'm in right now is not safe for me, physically or emotionally. Could be either one, usually both. Well, guess what? That's a violation of this pillar. The second one is, I'm being used, objectified. I'm being consumed as an object. I'm being treated like an object. I'm being used as an object. My individuality, everything I am, doesn't matter to this person. They're just using me like an object. And of course, he's talking about sexual assault. But as is true in the world of nature and biology, these things are on a spectrum. So it's like, it became really apparent with people that had just undergone a sexual assault. And I'm like, if it's true over there, it's probably true closer. And sure enough, once we started looking for it, we find it. I'm here in this environment and this person's using me. It feels not nasty, right? The third one is I cannot escape, or perception of inescapability. So the theory, let's see if I can help get clear on this. The theory is that these three traits are common in some capacity for all traumatic memories. And the way that this brain works, this brain doesn't draw straight line connections. It draws associations. It says, this is like a tree, that's like a tree, these two things might have something to do with each other. That was objectifying, this is objectifying, these two things might have something to do with one another. And when two things might have something to do with one another, what it does is it goes into the procedural memory system, finds all of the memories that are kind of like this one, and brings them closer to the surface so that they are more readily accessible. And if one of those is a big emotional time bomb, it blows up. So if all traumatic memories have some aspect of I'm being used, then if I'm in a conversation expecting vulnerability, or hoping for vulnerability, or agreeing that we're going to be vulnerable, and you vomit out a story on me, and I'm beginning to feel used in this dynamic, guess what? All of my traumatic memories are now closer to the surface. The situation will not feel safe. The situation will feel very uncomfortable, and I'll be confused on why. I'm sitting in this workshop talking to this person, and we're sitting here being vulnerable with each other, but man, it sure doesn't feel good. Why? I believe this is the reason why. So, that is my answer to actually both these questions. Why is it important and how does it work? So the fourth one, and I think I'm really big on tests. Because humans, traits, I've looked all through human history, and I'm like, what is something that is kind of universally true about humans? And oddly enough, the list is pretty small, but one of them is we are remarkably good at self-deception. There seems to be no point in time that humans are good at understanding themselves. I'm very good at deceiving myself about... I'm very good at deceiving myself about whatever's going on right now. So humans are really good at self-deception. So what does self-deception look like? Self-deception is like, I'm a really good driver. I can walk around believing I'm a really good driver, but if someone watches me from a distance, then be like, oh, maybe not. It's also self-deception, which I did for years. I'm really good at vulnerability. I can tell you about all the terrible things that happened in my life. Easy. I can walk up to a total stranger on the airplane and just start and describe, oh, this is how I got beaten, and blah, 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 whatever. Turns out I was just telling a story. I was not actually being vulnerable. Right? So, I devised these tests. How can I ask myself a question that challenges my self-perception? And on this one, it starts being really easy. If I think I'm being vulnerable with someone, I can ask one simple question. How terrified am I? Because if I'm sitting here having a discussion with you, and my goal is to be vulnerable so that we can evoke a stronger connection, I need to ask myself, am I frightened right now? Is sharing this information uncomfortable or scary? If it is, I'm probably being vulnerable. If I'm totally comfortable sharing that, I'm probably not. And one of yes.
Can I just hear myself say for a second, all of this is very sensitive territory. Like it can, when you were speaking about of all of the complex memories, like you drop something in there and the whole subconscious system comes up.
Yeah.
And before that, we were speaking to, if you then have someone who holds space for you in a healthy way,
Yeah.
like all of the triggers have the capacity to heal, to go down, to be soothed. Like all of this has the capacity to be good. If
Yes.
not, all of this has the capacity to get really astray. So just like the polarity in the whole system is, if you actually want one thing, you activate all of the things.
Well,
But
yeah. Being triggered means one particular memory blob is being activated in this moment. And, well, we got to decide how we want to live our lives. Do we want to live a life where I'm not triggered? This is kind of what's really popular in America right now. Or do I want to live a life where the triggers are decreased over time so that they stop being triggers? This is what we call trauma integration. The trauma stops being traumatic when the charge inside that memory blob is decreased to the point that it is no longer activating. It's no longer threatening for our nervous system. There's a bunch of different ways. I mean, I was not intending this to be a lesson on trauma, but I can get there if there's questions. But there's a way to approach trauma in the sense that you're creating, over time, you're creating more and more opportunities for the intensity inside that memory to decrease a little bit, decrease a little bit, decrease a little bit, decrease a little bit, and then eventually it stops being triggering. And this is a very reliable process. But it's not easy. And it's not pretty. Yeah.
Is it triggered something like before when something like so loud, and this makes me scared because when I was young, like my auntie when she throw the like glass or whatever, which is like even I'm already adult, it's been like many years ago, and it's like I still like shocked and scared.
Right.
It means like trigger.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm glad I work on it. I noticed why I keep getting shocked and my heartbeat is
Yep.
out of no reason. Like this
Yep.
is like sound from neighbors or from outside somewhere.
That's exactly
and
it.
I'm glad I'm aware of it and I work and heal for it. And
Right.
It takes time, long time, many months to not to get scared.
What?
A year maybe.
Yeah. It can take a long time, right? And there's different approaches we can use. But like what I was talking earlier about catching the ball, and the procedural memory system says, I know what to do, is that when you hear the loud noise, and the early stage, the child says, here's the loud noise, what's going on, looks at the situation and says, this situation is threatening. Your nervous system is, the amount of stress chemicals in your nervous system is going up, and when it crosses some threshold, it changes the way memory is encoded. And when that memory is encoded differently, it's basically stored as a trauma memory. And what happens is many things that happen in that moment get lumped together into one unit. So it's not just the loud noise, it's probably the loud noise, the smell of the wood nearby, what you're feeling interoception-wise, your heart rate in the moment, the amount of adrenaline and cortisol that is in your system, which is hormonal releases. All these things are stored in a single memory blob, and it has a label on it that says, threat. This might be the end of us. There's something in this fuzzy blob right here that was so scary that it got stored like this. And then later on, we hear the threat, we hear the noise. Everything that's noisy comes close to the surface. The big one gets access first because it had threat on it. And so that memory gets pulled into working memory up here. That procedural memory gets pulled into working memory and says, now our job is to chop this up and figure out what the hell's going on. But if my nervous system has the same capacity as it did then, it will overwhelm us. and then we make no further progress. If we just get triggered, it gets activated, all the stress hormones get released into our system, we become overwhelmed again, our brain shuts off again, and then it's just like, and then it takes 35 minutes for all that to calm down. Yes?
So what about with wiring, like our primary caregivers are their parents, and they have various things that are trauma that are having,
Yeah.
maybe just absorb everything.
Yep.
And then it gets wired up that love and trauma, or a lot of things, those wirings can connect. So
Yes.
if you get into a loving relationship, and someone's loving you, and it reminds you of a way, something familiar from childhood, all of a sudden you're triggered, the other person going, what the fuck just happened?
Exactly.
How do you decouple that?
For anyone that didn't hear him, it's this idea that in those first initial years of life, we're craving connection, and at some point in that time, the connection is coming from the primary attachment figures, along with something that's threatening. And we have this association that's then built between love or connection and threat. So now, someone being close to me, wanting to attune with me, wanting to hug me, wanting to express love on me, is now associated with danger. And this, as an adult, we classify as a dismissive avoidant attachment style. People who are dismissive avoidant will be, I'm wanting connection, but as soon as it shows up, they're like, oh, that's scary. I'm wanting connection, oh, ooh, that's scary. And they kind of have this in and out. I mean, that's the stereotype of how that works. There's, how do we uncouple it?
How do you love such a person so they don't get scared when you love? Be more real. That's
How do we love someone? How can we be present for someone that is in that kind of reactivity? And it's hard. I mean, it's really hard. I mean, this is literally like $1 million industry and thousands of really smart people. But I'm in a couple of schools where we talk about this all the time, and it cannot be done on either side individually. You cannot, if you're the partner of this person, you can be as present as you can be, but you can't move the needle on their end if they don't want to. And if you're the person that's deactivating or the dismissive avoidant, you can do your work, which is where the bulk of the work gets done, but at some point in time you need exposure. You need exposure therapy where the person actually comes and tries to love you, and you feel scary and threatening, and you say, I'm going to sit with this discomfort for a while and learn how to deal with it. So but I highly recommend, if this is a situation anybody finds themselves in, you find someone that is well versed in attachment theory and maybe EFT, which is Sue Johnson's emotionally focused therapy. I'm kind of at a bridge between those two. So, but don't try to do it on your own. It's not, it'll be, well, I mean, you can, but it'll be a rough ride. Yeah.
What I've found overall is I've worked with some consciously used psychedelics.
Mhm.
What I really like about psychedelics is it gets to this upper right one,
Yeah.
and it kind of detaches the synapses a little bit. So I always feel like you throw some form of glitter in the air, and because I made an effort to have a safe setting.
Yep.
It is much faster. Like, I started with psychotherapy by myself,
Yep.
and then EFT, and then EMDR, and all the
Yep,
things that
yep.
it took me for fucking ever, and I was so frustrated because I understand the pattern, but
Right.
I would still find myself in the same reaction.
Right.
And then people would tell me, like, it takes a long time, and I was not willing to invest that long time because I was getting impatient.
Yeah.
And because of the availability of that kind of person, you really need someone who's secure to work with you because you can't do it alone. So, and I was really glad that I found someone working with psychedelics with me, because it's like, for me, it increased the vulnerability in my brain and the allowance of how much I was actually allowing the new stimulus to settle in my brain, because everything was so volatile.
Yep.
So within a couple of sessions where I still got the trigger, but then there was someone trip sitting for me, and they were highly triggered. So that was a secure person. I was triggered, and they would sit with me, and they would, in this super vulnerable, mushy state, they would help me figure out, like, can you feel this? Where are you? And I'm like, okay, so this is new, and they're like, yeah, this is new. Really? Yes. Really? Yes. Really? Yes. Really? Yes. And you can ask for a million times, and the answer will still be yes. Can you understand that? And like, so I can stop asking? Yeah. And it was like, done. I'm like, okay, so I accept this as the new reality. It would have taken me a long time, I assume,
Yeah.
to have that kind of reaction in the psychotherapeutic
Right.
setting. So, yay for conscious use of psychedelics
Yeah.
in a safe environment.
Yeah. I actually used to guide. I used to guide when I was back in America. So I'm very familiar with the process. Yeah, and the way I describe it is that there's some certain substances that when you take adequate amounts of them, it basically makes everything look strange. Everything that is normal doesn't feel normal anymore. And because it doesn't feel normal, your brain is trying to find some pathway, and it might, because it doesn't know the age-old pathway that you've used 100 million times, it might find another pathway. And when it finds the other pathway, it's like, oh, this one might be better, right? And so but you can think of neural pathways as like ruts in the road, like old cowboy style, that it's like it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and then pretty soon you're walking this little tiny path like this, and you might have a million options out here, but because you're so deeply rutted right here, you can't, those are just not accessible. And so finding ways to get out of the rut and creates opportunities for other pathways to be accessed. And yeah, that's one approach. Yeah. Anyway, right. Okay, the test for vulnerability is, am I scared? That's it. It's really actually pretty simple. The thing that I like about this definition of vulnerability, that I really, really like, is it means the goalpost keeps moving as I grow. So what was vulnerable for me last month may not actually be that vulnerable for me now. I may have integrated the trauma, it's no longer scary, and this is something I can talk about with relative ease. And so last month I might have shared something with my partner, and it was like extremely uncomfortable and very vulnerable for me to be there, and we had this lovely bonding connection thing over it. But 2 or 3 months later, a year later, whatever, I can tell the same story, and it's not tapping in, like it's no longer scary for me. And as soon as it's no longer scary for me, that means I need to dig deeper. I need to go to a deeper level of challenging ideas. And so that kind of suggests this idea of, the Wizen guru that sits on the mountaintop, that has literally dealt with everything and it no longer has fear. It's very, very difficult, maybe impossible, for that person to actually be vulnerable. And oddly enough, we actually see that reflected with people that interact with those kinds. I've had a little bit of interaction myself, and I can say that dealing with someone that has dealt with all the fear in their life is like interacting with an alien. They are not human in this definition of human. There's no vulnerability there. And I think that's one of the things that makes them alluring, is that I can't actually connect to the guru because there's no emotionally vulnerable point of connection. For some, there's others that are, Anyway, that's just a thing to think about. So, exercise time. Yes.
Just when you think there's like a capacity portion here. Capacity and vulnerability to feel a certain amount before it gets to the point of spilling over into blame, attack, shaming on someone else, pushing. There's a softness of it that it's like if somebody's too triggered, they can't even. The part of the brain is gone.
Mm-hmm.
It's not there anymore.
Right.
And even if you're trying to be kind and loving to them in that moment, and give that food, safety, or whatever, they're in trouble. They're just gone.
Right.
And I guess it takes time.
Their conscious mind is gone.
Yeah.
the thing that you're used to interacting with is gone. This is absolutely true. When a trauma memory gets activated, it releases all these stress hormones. And one of the things that they do, other than triggering this change in the memory system, is that it comes up here, the prefrontal cortex, which is kind of where our highest brain functions live, and they kind of, it's like they jump in the middle of the neurons and prevent transmission. So high degree of stress hormones actually turns off our higher brain functions or inhibits them to the point they're only about 10% capacity. We call this state-based cognition. You can take people that can take an IQ test and register as genius, get them emotionally triggered, and they'll come back and their score will be half that. Like, our ability to think is directly related to our emotional state. So, your question though is that it's like, if I'm in a place, well, there's a little bit about this question that feels like it's coming from a different angle. Is that when I'm talking about vulnerability, it's about me. What am I going to do? So I can be sitting across the table from someone who's super triggered. That doesn't change my vulnerability level. Like, I can still check in with myself and say, am I sharing something right now that feels uncomfortable for me? Yes. Okay, then I'm probably being vulnerable. Am I sharing something that is easy? Then I'm probably not. I can still do that test. Now, how I handle this person across the table from me that's super triggered, that's a different discussion. I can go there if we want, but yes. Okay. So the exercise I would like to practice, and I'd like people to kind of pair off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we got 8. Good. You got to leave early? Okay. So yeah, that's basically it. It's like pair off, get with someone, find something inside that is uncomfortable, and then see if you can figure out how to communicate it to the other person. With intention. I'm choosing to share this with you right now. And it could be super simple. Like if our practice and skills at this are really low, it could be like, just speaking to you right now is uncomfortable. Like, just being here, making eye contact with someone that I don't know, and I don't know what you're thinking about me, that is uncomfortable. That's a vulnerable share. It doesn't have there's no requirement in vulnerability that you have to go into trauma or wounding or anything. It's just the emotions I feel with me right now. I actually think, so my friend Krish here teaches authentic relating classes, and I think that authentic relating is really good at providing a place for people to practice this skill, because it's becoming aware of what is happening inside me right now, and then sharing it. But I'm going to ask you on this one, so you can choose to not answer. But like, I feel like as you practice that more and more, the degree of discomfort gets less and less. Yeah.
Just when you talked about like how can you get less, I was thinking, oh, I did like this authentic relating level 2 twice.
Yeah.
And the first time I did it a year ago, just as an exercise where in the middle of the room, just sharing who you are, and just standing there was really scary for me.
Yeah.
And this time I realized, I have to amp it up to actually
Yes.
get to that place where I'm scared. I have to say something that makes me feel more embarrassed.
Yeah.
On purpose. And,
Did you,
really tricky.
in that experience, were there other people that stood up and you felt like they were kind of just reading a script or not really vulnerable in this way? Or do you feel like everyone was on point?
I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
But I definitely could see how the level is different for everyone.
Yeah.
Can I? So in some way, I'm seeing that there is a possibility of using vulnerability as a more game. So like, if it's a goal that I can actually move. So something that you just shared like a year ago, this was vulnerability, felt vulnerable to me, and now I have to amp it up. So if Is this we're going for the who's the most vulnerable here?
No.
You know, like what I'm.
Yeah,
Can you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, yeah.
So, like,
I mean, yeah, well, I think that would actually become, I think if there's someone caught in that game, I think it would become apparent pretty quickly. But the reason I bring it up is because it's about me. Like if I'm relating with you, my job is to check with me. And if we're in a space where I want to share vulnerably with you, I'm going to do this test with myself. I'm going to be like, okay, I'm sharing some things. This is easy for me. But I'm like, if I really want to be in a space with this person that's going to create an opportunity for deeper connection, I need to dig deeper. And it's not so much like, oh, more. It's just like, I'm testing myself and I'm like, because if I'm here trying to connect with you and I'm just vomiting out some story about my childhood, I now know that that's not going to help us connect in a more deeper, healthy, robust way.
But are you also checking before if that togetherness has the capacity to actually be safe? Because I also see the possibility of someone just oversharing and the other one's like, whoa, that's a lot of, I didn't expect that.
It's attunement.
Yeah.
So this is me being attuned to the person I'm reacting with. Because if I'm listening, I say listening, meaning my whole body is listening to their state, I'm gonna modulate that and be like, oh, so I'm ready to share something really deep that's actually uncomfortable for me, and I'm watching and I'm getting there, like I'm building up to it, right? And then I see that they've got resistance. I'm gonna back off, right? Again, that's me, my job. Yes.
As the authentic relating facilitator is being triggered, I want to add to that.
Yeah.
One thing in the classes we say like this is not the vulnerability Olympics, that you cannot make it
Yeah.
as competition to go like, oh, I have to always, and instead we say we go on the tender edge, softly, we widen that comfort zone softly, but we don't try to push it, because then again that could be enough for the nervous system.
Yeah.
And the other
Purpose
thing,
remains connection,
Yes.
not vulnerability.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
and the other thing, we also like in authentic relating, the way we learned it, we would ask somebody, before I share something vulnerable, I would share after. Can I share something vulnerable with you? Because actually it might be not just vulnerable for me, it will also be vulnerable for you.
Right.
And again, maybe my capacity is higher than yours, and I'm giving you something that's you have to be on to maybe the nurses.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. Because it's kind of this. Again, I'm coming at it from this angle that it's like, maybe I should have said this earlier, but it's like I'm coming at it from this angle. It's like I'm already in relation with someone, and we're at a place where vulnerability is needed. So maybe I should have just opened with that. But that's the idea: is that like vulnerability is needed in this place, and it's very easy to get caught in this place where I'm just telling a story, and that's the part that because we had it happen last week a lot, right? So, yes.
The most challenging times of vulnerability here when I'm scared and when I feel hurt.
Yeah.
And sometimes if I drop them really deep and I'm trying to be defenseless, it's just like, ouch, that hurts.
Yeah.
Well, I'm scared of you right now. And that's about the only thing to reach the person I'm talking to who's
Yep.
in that totally freaked out
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
I'm scared of you. You don't have to leave to keep yelling.
Yeah. I fully agree with that. I feel like it's a perfectly vulnerable share, because it's like this is real for me right now, and this is where my fear is, and it's just like I don't need anything more than that, right? And then there's other bits, right? I guess the other bit that I would bring to the table on this is that I share vulnerably with someone, and then I get to watch how they receive it. Right? Because if they receive it with rejection or avoidance or shame or blame or anything like that, that's now telling me something about I'm not feeling wanted, chosen, prioritized anymore, right? So like I just came with as real of me as possible, and they just, because of their reasons, which they've got their reasons, they treat it a certain way. Now I need to take that information I need to take that information in and process that. Something I will often say is, they just told me everything I need to know about maintaining a relationship with them, right? Like if I get super vulnerable and I share my reality with you and you don't hold it with some kind of reverence, then that's probably going to be a pattern I'm going to see a lot. And if I see that pattern a lot, I need to think about, okay, if I see this pattern every day or every week for the next 10 years, how am I going to feel? Probably not great. Yeah,
Am I, from a loving place, challenge you in that?
sure.
I guess I want to challenge the speculation.
Yeah,
If you observe that it might be, like, from my perspective, if I would see that, I would probably mirror that back to the person and go like, so I was actually hoping for a different reaction from you.
right.
And I get then, so I start to worry, if we maintain this connection, that I will be on the not healthy side of
Right.
your pattern for the next 10 years. And they
Right.
go like, oh,
Right.
so maybe I need to change this.
Right.
So I'm actually a catalyst for them
Right.
to really consider if they want to do that. Whereas if I'm not mirroring that back, they might walk away with the pattern, and I would not give them the option to look at the pattern.
Right.
Then it depends on the capacity that I'm having. If
Yeah.
I want to be their ally in their healing journey, or if
Right.
I'm like, oh, okay, that was not funny. I need to fix
Yep.
my broken something. It's like,
Yeah.
and they're not on my side.
Right. I totally agree with you, and that's a very personal decision that you make
Yes.
on that path. But a lot of people don't even get. A lot of people that I talk with, anyway, they don't even reach the point where they say, "Wow, that may have been enough." Like what just happened between us right now might have actually given me everything I need to know, right?
That's bold. I find that bold.
It is. It is.
You don't have the capacity or skill to listen.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's sometimes, but I mean, the way I see it is that should at least be on something that bold should be on the table, right? And it's like, okay, here's a piece. Did they just tell me everything I need to know about walking away? Yes, no, maybe, right? Did they just tell me everything I need to know about staying? Yes, no, maybe, right? And it's like there's these questions I'm asking myself and I'm considering. But when we have a dysfunctional attachment system, we oftentimes will prioritize connection over everything else. And when we prioritize connection over everything, guess who gets burned first? Our inner child. Right? All right. So I've been talking a lot. Thank you all for listening. But I've gotten feedback that the exercises are one of the favorite things here, and that I really like giving people a chance to practice this stuff. And so that's it. It's just like, let's find someone to talk with, have 5 or 10 minutes, and just talk and be in tune with how scary this is. And if it's scary, say, this is scary, right? And if it's too much, you can say, it's too much. You can say, I need to take a break. That's fine too. All of these things are okay, right? But I want to give you a chance in this space we've created together to practice this skill. All right? Okay. Thank you.